Good evening. At Hyde Park tonight, we've invited a Member of Parliament of Pakistan to join us in order to discuss regional security, trade and development. I'd like to talk a little about the personality we're featuring tonight. Shandana Gulzar Khan, a Member of Parliament of Pakistan. She is a professional with extensive knowledge and experience in legal affairs, international trade, economic law advocacy. In August 2013, just over a month ago, she was elected as a member of the lower house of the Federal Parliament, the National Assembly of Pakistan, the government of Imran Khan, who is seen as hope for Pakistan. Good evening and a warm welcome.
Good evening indeed. Thank you so much.
It's lovely to have you here, and I think just as I mentioned, over a month ago you took oath as a Member of Parliament, and this is also under the premiership of Imran Khan, someone very popular and who's seen as I said, an emerging source of hope for the people of Pakistan, bringing that trust, vesting that trust. But again, on the other end, there's a lot of controversy surrounding his rule, even as he has just begun his government. But to begin with, I'd like to ask you how the transition has been. So far, how is the transition?
Thank you, Indy. It's, I would say Pakistan is lucky in this regard. This is a third elected government which is coming into power. We've had two peaceful transitions, two democratic transitions, and this was equally peaceful and democratic. Controversy, I think, is part of any democratic setup, whether it's the United States, the EU. I've yet to see a country where there will not be somebody crying foul. But thank God we have evolved systems. We have a judiciary, a very strong judiciary. We have the election commission, an independent election commission, which was actually put in place by the outgoing government. We have electoral courts where recourse can be had. So in fact, just yesterday, an example of how what you see in the media is very different from the reality. The former Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif, his daughter and his son-in-law were released on bail by the Honorable High Court of Islamabad. Now, were it not for an independent judicial process and non-interference by the political government, that would not have happened. So I'm happy that the law is taking its course, and the controversies or the alleged whatever people are saying, I think eventually everybody will realize this figment of imagination, but that remains to be seen. We could spend a lot of time refuting those allegations, but then it stops us from doing our main work, which is rebuilding this nation.
Your government has set a foot to begin rebuilding the nation.
Yes.
What measures have you immediately started? If you look at the first 100 days, what are we really looking at in terms of Pakistan integrating with the rest of the world, with the region, with especially South Asia, with India there, a giant neighbor next to you, there's a lot of mending needed in terms of relations between India and Pakistan. What are we looking at from the new government?
Okay, so that's a huge question. I'm going to break it down. The first part was, what is this government doing in its first 100 days? The Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf, or the PTI, popularly, the party of Imran Khan. This is the first time in the history of this country we've actually had a 100 days agenda, which was released sometime in May 2018, so well before the election, well before we came into government. And the point of that entire 100-day agenda was to show the people that this is what we intend to do. This is the agenda we will set in the first 100 days. The implementation will, of course, be broken down into 5 subsequent years. Rome wasn't built in a day, so clearly that applies to us as well. And we've inherited such a difficult mix that it's going to take us at least time to sort it out. Often people are quick to answer that this is the solution, this is the solution. However, if we don't get the questions right, we're going to be in a lot of trouble. Part of the reason why I'm in Sri Lanka is to talk about evaluation and evaluation of government initiatives. So we don't want to fall into that trap all over again. Wrong solution for the wrong problem. Specifically when it comes to the 100-day agenda, we have 6 themes and 35 promises to the nation. Interestingly, all those 35 promises reflect the Sustainable Development Goals. The main reason we were invited to Sri Lanka and to talk about how governments are now going to help their own nations. When it comes to the region, I think the best platform we have is SAARC. The government of Prime Minister Imran Khan is on track to ensure that we have the best possible relations with all our neighbors. Where India is concerned, that's a huge question. There are so many intricacies, so many problems since the inception of both our countries. Therefore, I think there's going to be a very nuanced approach, new from what went before us. I don't think any nation in the world would like to be at war. It's a given. We've seen Sri Lanka's experience, we've seen the US experience, we've seen so many experiences. So peace for us comes before anything else. But it has to be a peace which is lasting, which is sustainable, and on equal footing based on trust and respect.
A renewed friendship that will benefit the rest of the region. But before we talk more about your country and the agenda, I'd actually like to focus on women representation as a member of parliament, as a female member of parliament in Pakistan. It's quite interesting when I went through some statistics today. The lower house has 20 seats allocated for women. Parliament, upper house, and the lower house, in fact, 68, I beg your pardon, and this is out of 342 seats. Well, in Pakistan, I understand there's a quota system which enables women participation, and this is contrary to some of the reports that we hear in media and reports that come out about women participation, lack of empowerment for women, but I think these figures are very encouraging.
So, the Constitution of Pakistan mandates these quotas. These quotas are at 3 levels. Upper House of Parliament, 20 seats at present. Lower House of Parliament, minimum 62 seats. There can be more, but there must be 62 women in the lower house, which is the National Assembly, from where I also come. Then you have representation at the 3rd level, which is the provincial level. We have reserved seats for women members of parliament in the provincial assemblies, given that we're a bicameral legislature as well as a federation. More interestingly are the provisions in the Electoral Act, under which it states that if certain areas have less than 10% female voter turnout, those elections will be annulled, and 2 particular elections have been annulled. Because anywhere where there's even sort of a smell of collusion between the various political parties as to women's participation, that in the law it has been made very clear that will not be acceptable. So I'm very happy to say that. Now, when it comes to the perception of Pakistani women in the media in particular, I'd like to think I'm one of the examples of how the truth is often stranger than fiction. I come from the deeply conservative north of my country. I come from a village. My father was a self-made officer, also a politician who died last year, and he forced me to go to court. I'm a trade lawyer. And I didn't wish to go because going to court would have meant that I had to unveil my face. And I fought that tooth and nail. I was only 22. What do you expect? I was used to a certain mindset. The patriarchy had convinced me that that is what was correct. But my father, the man I looked up to above everyone, was saying, no, you're going to uncover your face. So can you imagine, for a 22-year-old, it's very confusing. And we fought about it till I was forced to go. So this is reverse discrimination in some sense, that I gave up my right to cover my face, because in his point of view, there were far other important things a woman could do. Parda, or covering up the face, or veiling, is an important important part of a person's personal beliefs. However, how do you change a nation where 50%, 52% of its members are females? So his idea was to drive women out of their homes, get into medicine, accounting, engineering, professions where you could help your own people. And I'm a lawyer. I've been doing this for the last 22 years. I'm proud to say that from my village alone, we have now nurses, doctors, engineers. This is happening at an individual level. I cannot even tell you what is happening at the collective level. But I think it would be very useful both for Pakistan and the world at large to know that things are not what they seem. So rather than blaming international media, I think we just have to be more proactive and portray ourselves in a truthful manner. The truth is not always pretty.
To take the word across.
Yes, take the word
rest of
across.
the nation.
Yes.
And the world, of course. But I'm quite interested in your background here. You've studied law, and then you've also read at the University of Cambridge for a master's degree in international trade and economic law here. And you're balancing your expertise in trade, legal affairs, investments, and dispute resolution. Let's talk about how it has been for you to actually go out to the world and be rightfully educated in order to bring back something to your nation.
Thank you. So as I've told you already, I'm a lawyer by profession. I was lucky enough to get a full scholarship to the University of Cambridge right after law school. I worked for a year. And then I worked in and out of Pakistan for the last 18 years. I served as Pakistan's legal advisor to the mission of Pakistan to the World Trade Organization. So I'm a World Trade lawyer. And 7 years I represented Pakistan. One of the reasons I decided to move back because there was not enough. I wish to reverse the brain drain, let's put it that way. One person can't do it, but one person at a time can help. We have some immense talent in the diaspora. So part of the reason to move back was to contribute to that factor. Since then, I served as a consultant to the previous Commerce Minister and Commerce Secretary. And what we're trying to do is something very different from purely commercial diplomacy. We don't want just commerce. We want to grow the trade, but we want to do it in an inclusive and sustainable manner. Jobs matter.
Right.
People matter. And I guess what sort of drew me to the PTI's manifesto is that people come before anything else. You have jobless economic growth in many countries. You put up a large factory or an industry which employs 10 people and about 100 robots. That doesn't serve the purpose. It may be efficient, but it's destroying the base of the country, the base of production, which is people and discontent people. So I think part of the reason civilizations forget where they're headed is because they become so single-mindedly focused on just the dollar signs. Dollar signs are necessary, of course, but what we need is an equivalent human growth, the Human Growth Development Index. We need growth in that as well. So for me, it's been fascinating because I've been welcomed, I've been respected. I've worked with people from all strata of society, men mostly, but some men who've been to school, who have higher educations, who have exposure, some that don't. And I've yet to come across an incident where I was treated as less than an equal. So for somebody like me coming from a village, still living in the village, but also a highly urbanized youth, I lived in many parts in the country, abroad. So I cannot say that my experience has been negative, but it depends from person to person.
Yeah. And I'd like to divert our attention, our discussion to trade. Sri Lanka and Pakistan enjoy a free trade agreement, and Sri Lanka's FTA with Pakistan becomes, incidentally, the first FTA signed by Pakistan with any country. And to date, bilateral trade stands at around $453 US. This is between the figures as at 2017-18. And of course, we're looking at enhancing the FTA into a more regional capacity where trade is not just between Sri Lanka, Pakistan, but where we can, through this FTA, reach other nations. But what is the potential of trade between our two countries?
Okay. Thank you for that, Indy. It's interesting that both Pakistan and Sri Lanka are members of the World Trade Organization as well. One of the major reasons that countries, in particular countries in the region, decide that they wish to have more trade is also governed by the World Trade Organization rules. So if you wish to do bilateral trade or a free trade agreement, the idea is to do more trade, not less trade. Pakistan and Sri Lanka are intimate trading partners. We have very good trading relations, very good commercial relations. As to the first question, what we could do possibly to extend this to the region, I think we already have an unutilized trade agreement, which is the SAARC. SAARC, unfortunately, at the moment only covers trade in goods. If that agreement were amended to also cover agreement and services, then of course tourism is the main form of trade that would take place, so person-to-person services trade, as we would say. Earlier, as you mentioned, because of the political relations between two of the largest member states of SAARC, the visa situation is not the best at the moment. That doesn't mean it will be that way forever. Hopefully, peace will be achieved. Hopefully, things will settle down. But in the meantime, SAARC should not suffer. In 2016, Pakistan was going to host the annual SAARC summit, which didn't take place due to, again, political constraints. Having said that, I think trade is the way to go, because many countries have been able to not necessarily put aside, but to in parallel work on political relations and at the same time expand trade relations. Coming back to Pakistan's trade with Sri Lanka, there's so many things that Pakistan could benefit from Sri Lanka. I was just meant, this is my first visit to Colombo, and while I have lovely Sri Lankan friends, it's a pity I felt that not more Pakistanis know about the beauty of Sri Lanka and the value of traveling here. Most people quickly, Turkey's become a favorite hotspot in Pakistan, but many people flock to Dubai, which is again a lovely destination, but why not Sri Lanka? I was looking at, we haven't had much time to relax thanks to our grueling schedule here, but there are so many opportunities for not necessarily large companies, but for SMEs to actually reach out to each other and have a mutually beneficial trading relationship. I intend to go back to my ministry after having been here and talk to my seniors, the minister in particular, that there's certain untapped resources that we are missing. Now, that I don't think it's by design, not with Sri Lanka, of course, but sometimes it's oversight. As I said, we've inherited so many problems that it's difficult to come down to the lower hanging fruit and actually take care of that first. We're looking at the major issues: electricity, gas, water, where people's survival depends. So while we will come down to this, but I think given the close relations between Sri Lanka and Pakistan, in defense and tourism and culture and everything, it would be sad if we didn't take advantage of this beautiful relationship in commerce as well.
Right. Talking about tourism, I'd like to, in our part of the world, the Maldives is an amazing tourism hotspot. But is it that Sri Lanka, Pakistan, our destination marketing, what lagging areas do you think could be ironed out by working together? Pakistan is an amazing country which offers landscape and several other, opportunities for a potential tourist. But again, what are we really not doing as countries, developing countries, to achieve what our potential really offers?
So interestingly, my former boss, also now within the party, we came to the same conclusion that on the ground we're prepared, we have everything, then why are not things taking off? We have one of the most open investment regimes in the world. But if we come to tourism, our visa process is not the most cumbersome in the world. As I said, political problems aside, it's not a problem to come to Pakistan. There's many Arab airlines, Arab country-owned airlines, there's many direct flights. And we realized it was a lack of effective marketing. As I said earlier, we're bogged down with so many day-to-day realities that we forget that there's this unexplored frontier. So last year, November 2017, the Commerce Ministry launched something called Emerging Pakistan. Right. Emerging Pakistan was this initiative to highlight to especially the younger people all over the world that this is a nation with a difference. We have some painful problems to deal with, some imposed upon us, some endemic to the circumstances and the geographic situation where we're situated. But if you look at the beautiful side of it, the 70% or the 80% of it, it's worth coming to. Many countries tend to gloss over their problems. We chose not to take that approach. We're as normal a country as anyone else, and we will have problems. What we do have is exceptional potential, lovely talent, hospitality. So once that Emerging Pakistan was launched, now we have a dedicated website which talks about commerce, which talks about travel, which talks about tourism. That is what we had missed. Many countries have interesting signposts. For example, Malaysia, truly Asia. That stayed in my mind for many years. I saw it on CNN once. So I think the only missing link is this targeted marketing of the potential of our countries. Invite people and then we'll see if they come or not, but at least extend the invitation.
Moving back to South Asia, I think the World Bank report, a recent report, says that at present South Asia is one of the least integrated region. Being a very small region, closely located geographically, we're still very limitedly integrated. And in it also says that certain barriers could be removed by increasing intra-regional trade, as we discussed a short while ago. But there is potential from $23 billion to $67 billion, the World Bank says. Again, how do you think we can achieve this, given the fact that there is still tension in the region, India, Pakistan, and there is also the two giants in the Asian region, India and China. Now, this is a question that we developing countries tend to, we constantly balance this out. In Maldives, in Sri Lanka, in Pakistan, with increased Chinese investment and Indian involvement, there is a lot of tension. How do we look at this?
Yeah. So to your first question, the World Bank report is true when it says that it is one of the least integrated areas. But I think the problem in this instant, interestingly, is not political. It is historical. Culturally, Asian peoples are reserved people. We will be the best of hosts, but we'll never really tell you what we're thinking. We'll never really tell you what we're feeling. We'll never really tell you what bothers us. That's the culture. As a diplomat in Geneva, I found it really insulting that for the first 6 months of my tenure, nobody came to say hello to me. And I mentioned as much to a colleague of mine from Canada, and he said, look, this is no longer Asia. You have to be the first one to go introduce yourself as a new arrival. And I found that notion hilarious. In our cultures, when a guest comes, you welcome him with open arms. So clearly, there was that mindset change. So when it comes to the first answer is cultural. Cultural reasons are what prevent us from deeper integration, but that doesn't mean it's not doable. Political reasons we all know, so there's not much more that can be said on that. However, where trade integration is concerned, that is correct. What the report doesn't mention is that we are not a flat land. We are not an easy to reach route. There are many transit and logistical problems in the middle. There's mountains, there's waters, there's seas, and there's no infrastructure. China, as you say, China is a game changer for Pakistan in this respect. The CPEC, the corridors, the construction. Infrastructure is the main problem. Even within Pakistan, the railways, we do not utilize them to their fullest potential for commerce and trade. Can you imagine a Southeast Asian SAARC region railway which would cater to tourism, to trade, a simple solution, and that would dramatically increase the numbers both in trade and in tourism. A very simple solution. How to do it? Resources. And it's not always politics which is the problem, it's also the ground reality. Do I, as a country, as Prime Minister Imran Khan, do I devote my resources to tourism and industry, or am I going to give people who are victims of the war or terror, do we give them homes to live in? Do we give them water to drink? Do we give safe, clean water? Do we give them hospitals? So it's such a difficult trade-off at this point in time, but that doesn't mean that those choices will not be made, because time is going ahead of us. We don't have the luxury of dress rehearsal. Everything has to be done today.
Talking about CPEC, Prime Minister Imran Khan pledged to implement this controversy hit 50 billion China-Pakistan economic corridor, and under this, as I said, $50 billion worth of investment has been launched. Taking this into consideration, there are also talks of Pakistan's sovereignty being influenced. This is something that I mentioned, China's involvement, India's concern. But what is the Pakistani government's stance? How do you think your government should and will tackle this situation?
This is, I think, India world, this is a very old question, sovereignty. When you join, I'm sure Colombo has some sort of sports club, some sort of gymkhana, some sort of a formal club where members gather to eat, drink, and there will be rules. There will always be rules. You cannot enter in a certain dress, you cannot enter a temple in a certain dress, you cannot enter a school in a certain dress. There will always be rules. So sovereignty in that sense is never ever changed by doing trade or by the CPEC in particular. That remains untouched. What does happen is you've opened up your borders, both mentally, physically, metaphorically. You've asked another nation to come and help you build your country, and you're their partner when you're doing it. Partner is the word we're looking at. Investments will be made in Pakistan as Pakistan wishes, where Pakistan needs. Incidentally, the figure's gone up to 62 billion from the latest reports, but again, one will have to double check. So sovereignty is not the issue at all, I think, and again, that's popular articles that make it to the media. What one doesn't hear is the truth, that the concern is not so much with who's doing what, but what is being done. For instance, certain provinces of the country in the previous government were unhappy with some of the trade routes. They felt that they were benefiting certain areas within the country at the expense of others. Now, you don't hear that usually. And so those are the kind of things we are going to look at to ensure that the entire country benefits from this, as well as our Chinese partners, our friends. China and Pakistan have a long historical relation, like Sri Lanka. I know it sounds extremely rhetorical to say brotherly relations, but that's exactly what it is. And there's a deep trust. So we're not worried on that front at all. The concerns are more about how do we internally align our own ministries, how do we make sure that what we have promised actually happens. And one point which I missed out on earlier, you were talking about integration. Right. The government of Prime Minister Imran Khan has recently ensured that Sikh pilgrims from India are able to come to Pakistan to pay homage. They've had to open up a particular route. So combining that with China, India, everything is on course, everything is on par. But of course, the kind of facilitation that would be given to Sri Lanka or China would be different from India. We don't hide away from that reality. But we also don't want to be pessimistic. Of course, things will change. We are going to do our best as Pakistan. That is assured. How the other party reciprocates is, of course, entirely up to them.
Well, I'd like to talk to you about your presence in Colombo. Well, Evaluation Colombo 2018. This is a new initiative for Sri Lanka. In fact, we've launched our national evaluation policy here in Sri Lanka, becoming one of the very first countries to have an evaluation policy with the objective of reaffirming the importance of using evidence as part of good governance, bringing a policy of reform, making informed decision making, if I may say. I'd like to talk to you about evaluation and your contribution to evaluation, how we in Sri Lanka and Pakistan could make informed research-based decision making to achieve policy reforms through evaluation as a subject.
Thank you, Indy. Interestingly, this entire process started with Sri Lanka. In fact, the Honorable Kabir Hashim from Sri Lanka, your minister, he has been the sole force behind this initiative from 2011, along with two of his colleagues from Nepal and Bhutan, I think. He alone has spearheaded this particular drive and brought over 104 members of parliament to Sri Lanka. Right. This has never happened before. Members from Europe, from Latin America, from Asia, from Africa. I think that in itself is a huge credit that goes towards the government of Sri Lanka. Both the President and the Prime Minister supported his initiative. We've been welcomed, we've been feted, we've been taken all over. I have to say, Sri Lankan, in fact, it gives me good opportunity to dive in and talk about Sri Lankan hospitality, in particular the youth. They were so incredibly patient with us, parliamentarians, asking all sorts of nonsensical questions, 3 days non-stop. It was heartwarming. It felt like coming home. So I have to say, on a personal level, I'm very moved by what has been done. People, we humans, we tend to become cynical. So much stuff happens by the time you reach 40 that you are kind of done with the world. But then once in a while, people come along and they move you and they shake you. In fact, the Honorable Kabir Hashim actually made us wave our hands, and not knowing what we were doing because he wanted our attention. It's been wonderful, this entire learning experience, and it was a lot of learning, I have to say. I'm a trade person, I do trade and development. Yes. This was the whole world of development in 3 days, Sustainable Development Goals.
Right.
How to make sure that the voluntary national reviews that governments present to the UN are actually based on evaluation, evidence-based. Now, common sense tells us, why would any sovereign country wish to present a charge sheet against itself on failing to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals to the UN or even to itself? But there is a valuable lesson here. Encouraging countries to come forward and talk about what worked, what didn't, and why. Because then you set the bar for other members that wish to follow you, others who may not have that amount of resources. Evaluation, evidence as a toolkit for parliamentarians was the focus of this particular get-together. How parliamentarians need to be responsible and hold their own governments to account. Usually we hold the opposition to account. In this case, it's going to be members of our own parliament, our own party, holding our own administrative district level governments to account, i.e. whether all the money being pumped into small projects at the district level, at the country level, at the city level, are they actually making an impact? Sure, we decided to make 6 reservoirs for water, and then what happened? That's where the story ends. We have lovely, long, 300-page monitoring reports, but nobody reads those reports. Right. I don't read those reports. But if I were to have an evaluation of the impact, I'd make sure that the money doesn't go out the same way the next time. So it was very interesting to bring together all these parliamentarians. We had a Colombo Declaration, and the Colombo Declaration, we've agreed to actually work with WOPES, which are these voluntary organizations that in the past used to provide shadow reports. Now they actually help you in making your national report. More than the idea, as you said earlier, of sovereignty, maybe country X doesn't wish to present its voluntary national report to the UN because it's got sensitive issues at home. What is really useful then, that voluntary national report is submitted to its own parliament, to its parliamentarians, to show that this is where we got it wrong. So if you wish to help your people, if you're a genuine parliamentarian, if you wish to be a leader, you wish to be the change, make the change, this is where evaluation comes in.
Right. I think when we talk about evaluation for Sri Lanka, what's most important to is evaluate the debt burden. Sri Lanka's debt component has been increasing, and since it's your subject area, I'd also like to ask you, you may not be very much very well versed about the Sri Lankan situation in debt, but I'd like to ask you, what remedies do you actually suggest Sri Lanka takes going forward in terms of curbing and managing this debt burden as a country? I'm sure with development projects, infrastructure, this would be a similar case in Pakistan too.
This is a similar situation in many countries. I read an article yesterday, I'm not sure, I think it was the Financial Times, I'm not sure, but it was a similar situation in India, the trade giant of the region. Debt burden is a massive problem for Pakistan. Right now we have a $16 billion trade deficit. We have a debt, we have so many issues on the economic front. And so there's a traditional response, which is to curtail imports. That's a short-term remedy, it doesn't help. There are other remedies, which is to increase your export, which is a long-term plan. There are other remedies available, which is to ensure that the wastage doesn't occur. And in this, we have, from my country, I can tell you that Imran Khan has launched an austerity drive in Pakistan. Austerity will work at all levels. It will work at the individual level, at the household level, at the district level, at the city level. So we have to understand that this is a long-term problem, and there will be long-term solutions to it, and they will be very painful. Change is always painful, and that's what Imran Khan
is Pakistan really committed to this plan?
Certainly. In fact, thank God, the previous government from my province, which is KP in the north, it was also then the PTI government, Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf, which is headed by the Prime Minister Imran Khan. And one of the things he did to meet one of the sustainable development goals, which is of reforestation and of environmental degradation, we had the billion-tree tsunami, which was scoffed at by many people, the procurement process and the launch process. But it is a worldwide success. There are reports on it by the World Economic Forum, by so many other fora. It was easy, it was doable, and we did it. And now they've launched another billion-tree tsunami for urban, and the entire country now, for urban areas and for the provinces. So I have to say that when you see these little things happening, we've been only in government for over a month and 6 days. we have our huge expectations from our own government, of that of Imran Khan. 26th November is our 100-day mark. We will have a sit down on that particular day or the subsequent day with our stakeholders, with the Prime Minister intends to address the nation on how far he came, using evaluation, why wasn't he able to reach certain goals, what were the reasons, what was holding him back. And I think the biggest thing about this new government is transparency and accountability. We need to be able to address our own problems first. And not only do I see it in the chairman, but I also see it, or the Prime Minister, but the entire bunch that we are of members of Parliament. People have different capacities. Some of us are educated, some of us are landowners, some of us are business people. But he's put us all on the same platform. He's made us believe in vision, in the vision that he sees. Yesterday I met this lovely lady, a Sri Lankan colleague, who told me that 22 years ago she had met Imran Khan in Sri Lanka talking at a SEMA conference. And that's when she decided she was going to leave her banking career and join social work. And she says she's so thrilled by the idea that the man who inspired her is now the Prime Minister of Pakistan. Cricket is, of course, a different issue, but I would like to take that message back to Pakistan as well, to Sri Lanka, that the man has been able to change mindsets everywhere.
I think 23 some years in the making of a politician, a statesman today. Imran Khan has touched many lives. But again, before we talk more on him, I think our viewers would love to hear about Imran Khan from you, a fellow Pakistani. But about corruption, now you mentioned the commitment of the government to eradicate corruption, to instill transparency, good governance. Now, good governance is something that the present unity government of Sri Lanka has been talking about. They came to power on the back of promises to instill stability and good governance. But of course, good governance in the broader sense, it's a heavy word. There's a long way to it. Bringing evaluation to good governance and tackling corruption, what is the way forward?
It's painful, but it starts with me. This is what my Prime Minister said. In the last 2 weeks, one of our parliamentary affairs advisors, a very senior politician from our party, he stepped aside from his post. And the reason he did that, because a case has been initiated against him by our National Accountability Bureau. In the past, in the very, very not so distant past, that would never have happened. There would have been ways and means to cover up media reports, to cover up that entire investigation. Not so. Imran Khan stood by his decision to resign from his post. We all stood by him. Let the law take its course. So I think it's not a very complicated route towards transparency and accountability. If it starts with me, it will go everywhere. But if it's just going to be a witch hunt, then it will fail quicker than it started.
Right. Now, Imran Khan, I think a very popular speech, something that inspired many, was shortly after taking office, he announced cutting down expenditure from his end, as you say, start with me. And 70 luxury government vehicles were to be auctioned, and he was ready to forego the lavish lodgings normally used by a Prime Minister, so on and so forth. But this also inspired many people in this region especially. Is this happening?
Yes. So interestingly, he made a speech to members of the party shortly thereafter, after addressing the nation. It was interesting that I wish that speech had also been made public, because where the matter of the auction is concerned, it was not just luxury vehicles, it was all the extra vehicles in the Prime Minister's residence, some of which were dilapidated and some of which are in mint condition.
Right.
Then, of course, he forewent living in the Prime Minister's residence, and he took a smaller residence. Of course, now the Prime Minister's house employs more than 500 people. This is what was not shown on the media, but this is something he told us, that there are more than 500 houses and families, low income, depending on those jobs. And will I eradicate those jobs? Of course not. By not living there, that doesn't mean I wish to cut down on those household expenditures, which are the basic. I mean, they're making $120 a month.
Right.
You don't do that. That is not austerity, that is cruelty. So what they did was, the plan is now to ensure that they're relocated within the government, they do not lose their jobs. Right. So austerity doesn't mean punishing others. You start with yourself. you do what you can. The Prime Minister has a lovely residence in Banigala in Islamabad in the hills, where he is on the weekends. But I think that is the balanced way to go. Austerity must be accompanied by ensuring that the most vulnerable areas of our population are not targeted. And that's difficult to do.
Right. I think on that note, it's time we wrap up. But before we go, I must talk a little about your Prime Minister, Imran Khan, former cricket captain. Of course, we cricket fans, cricket nations that love cricket. Are we to see upliftment and improvement or state sponsorship to cricket now that you have a former cricketer as your Prime Minister?
I hope so, but I do know that all sport, cricket of course, but all sport, anything to do with the youth, we're a country with 70% youth. Imran Khan is aware of that. And so the Prime Minister is going to ensure that not only is cricket given a facelift, moving into a next phase, that talented youth from the entire country can make it. We already have the IPLs, the Premier League, Pakistan Premier League, different cricket matches happening in Dubai. But certainly, cricket is always at the forefront. In fact, I have friends from other nations that don't even know what cricket is as a game. But for those of us in the region, it's our lifeline. We forget everything and we watch cricket matches. Some people actually don't go to work to watch a match.
In our part of the world.
Exactly. So this is to hoping that cricket diplomacy, sport diplomacy, all of that will figure into this huge national movement forward by the government of Prime Minister Imran Khan.
Thank you very much, Shandana. It was a pleasure having you here at Hyde Park.
Thank you, indeed. Thank you so much.
We had with us Pakistan's Member of Parliament of the ruling party, Shandana Gulzar Khan, joining us at Hyde Park. Thank you very much for your time. We'll see you again next Thursday at the same time. Have a pleasant evening. Good night.